Hey everybody, and Tony here with a review of Rugrats the movie, which was released back on November 20, 1998. The film was directed by Igor Kovalyov and Norton Virgin. It was produced and created by Arlene Klasky and Gabor Chupal. It was edited by Kimberly Retberg and John Bryant, with music by Mark Mothersbaugh. Now, I first saw this film when I was about 6 or 7 years old, when it was first released in the Philippines in 1999, and I pretty much enjoyed this film for the time being. And interestingly enough, this movie was set after the episode Family Tree, in which Dee Dee is celebrating Mother's Day, and Stu and Dee Dee decide to go on a cruise to celebrate that very special day, leaving Tommy alone. And Chaz starts to feel rather worried about Tommy, even though he notices that Chucky, Phil, Lil, and Angelica are having fun with each other, or so he thinks they are. And Chaz thinks that, okay, Tommy might need like some type of caring because he might think that he might suffer from severe loneliness. So he takes care of him, and the episode, and also the fact that, okay, there was also a misunderstanding between Chucky and Tommy as well, but everything else is ironed out, and the episode ends with Dee Dee finding out after like several C6 spells that she's pregnant, which thus leads to the events of the movie. So, does this movie hold up to this very day, or does it not stand the test of time? Let's find out. Now, story-wise, this is kind of actually an intriguing story when you put the main baby's story, especially when Tommy is trying to find, like, the quote-unquote wizard. Though at first, Phil, Lil, and Chucky think that Dill should be returned back to the hospital because, well, that's where he came from after he was born. And, well, accidentally they take Cynthia along with him. But even though the baby's journey is sort of like the main story, there are like a lot of other things that kind of jumble up this movie. Like the whole newscasting crew and the entire thing with Angelica looking for Cynthia and this ringmaster and his assistant along with their, well, troop of monkeys, and finding out that their troop of monkeys ended up escaping through a runaway train, and there's just a lot of things that don't really seem to be so cohesive in this movie in terms of its story. Even though there are times that it can be enjoyable, and even though it does have a great sense of adventure, there are times that it doesn't really stand out. It basically feels like I'm watching Homeward Bound, but with babies, or even like their quote-unquote journey to find the wizard almost feels like watching Wizard of Oz. And this film is also riddled with pee jokes and then the occasional poop jokes. Yeah, I definitely felt pretty grossed out with it growing up and kind of realized, oh my gosh, what the hell were these people thinking? It's bad enough that I get to see this, and, well, it kind of gets bothersome. But still, despite the fact that it does have a good sense of adventure, it doesn't really stand out. It also doesn't help with the fact that there were some jokes that kind of felt, what the hell? And sometimes there are moments in which the story doesn't always feel that, well, cohesive or thought together. It basically feels like kind of a bit of a mess. It kind of feels disorganized. So there are definitely a lot of flaws in the story, but still it manages to be kind of enjoyable from time to time. And now let's get to the animation. Now, the animation is pretty much well done, and it doesn't cut corners or anything. And, well, it does maintain that sense of whimsy and charm that the Rugrats always had, albeit with the animation in this movie, you could see that there was a bigger budget involved, and it's also reflected on all the movements and even all of the motions of each of the machines that Stu has built. And well, that's what I kind of feel about the animation. It's actually really great and really pleasing to the eyes. Oh, and one more thing I'd like to say about the story. I guess the strongest part in the story definitely has to be the relationship between Tommy and Dill. Whereas with all the others were pretty much flaws, this was pretty much the only strength in this movie for me, and not to mention the character dynamics, which I'll get to the characters later. So, like I said, even though some of the stuff in this film kind of failed in terms of writing or were kind of mediocre at best, at least there were a couple of elements in the story that were actually pretty decent, especially when it comes to the animation. I thought it was just really well done. And then we get to the soundtrack. Now, as usual, there's always the classic Mark Mothersbaugh composition, which I always seem to like and like found myself listening to every single time. But there are times that this movie even tries to be a musical, and it kind of feels like these songs were kind of like forced into the film rather than like thought up properly. They basically feel, well, rather forced instead of just like instead of just having a sort of a more organized way of putting the songs in, just like what any proper musical would. It just tries its hardest because I get what they're trying to do. As usual, to be expected, animated features, or a lot of animated features, especially when it comes to the likes of Disney, usually have musical numbers. So I do appreciate the effort put into those songs, but they don't really resonate with me. I'm not really a huge fan of the songs, especially with the baby's numbers in the hospital. I mean, it kind of feels rather weird, though. I would have to say that the singers behind behind the baby's voices definitely did put in a lot of heart and soul. And I could really see that the voice actors and the voice actresses did have a lot of fun with singing, especially in some of their roles. The only song that I really liked, but a teensy little bit, definitely has to be The Lullaby to Dill, which I thought was just really sweet. So overall, the songs in this film are pretty forgettable, with the exception of Dill's Lullaby. It's actually the most decent song in this film. And then we get to the characters. Now, before I get to the main characters, I'd like to talk about Dill in this movie. I felt like he kind of served no purpose. Well, in the first part, he didn't serve any purpose. Only then did he redeem himself in the last few moments of this film. But it's like throughout the majority of the film, he was basically crying and screaming and kicking and at times being rather selfish and being not that great of help in terms of Tommy and his friends. But still, his relationship with Tommy, especially in the quieter moments, was very sweet, and, well, I would have really loved to see him grow a lot more as a character. And I could understand why a lot of people don't really care for Dill as a character, mostly because he's there to look cute, he's there to, like, give off the pretty infantile jokes in this film, and there are times that he pretty much blithers on. But still, he manages to kind of redeem himself in the last act of this movie. And while you get Tommy, who's the usual leader of the group, and they embark on this very huge adventure. And sure, Tommy does have his uncertainties, which really does show a lot more layers to him as well, making him all the more human. Especially when it comes to Chucky. Now, it's never new seeing Chucky face his fears, but especially in a situation like this, wouldn't you be surprised that he actually does accomplish it? And even with Phil and Lil, they're pretty much the same characters, but they do pretty much grow as characters in this adventure that they take. So I also kind of find it far-fetched to see that these are babies, trekking alone in the woods, in such huge woods, and then they traverse through rivers, and it's it's kind of shocking when you think about it, considering that they're babies. Yes, Homeward Bound does make sense because the main animal characters, such as the two dogs and the cat, are basically adult aged, and they're actually capable of traveling by themselves. And, well, it's just the journey that they go through. These are babies, and I kind of find it rather far fetched, and, well, kind of I kind of question the logic, but still, despite that, it is pretty much an exciting adventure that they go through. Angelica is, well, pretty much the same, and even though she does have that one shining moment in which she did care for Spike, especially when he had that great big fall after his fight with the wolf. And the monkeys, well, they remind me from of the Bandar log from the Jungle Book, whether it's the original novel or the Disney movie. I think they have more of that Disney movie vibe, especially considering that they're basically this movie's version of the Bandar log. They try to take away Dill, and they cause a lot of havoc, especially to the likes of Tommy, Chucky, Phil, and Lil, and even Dill. And then you have the grown-ups. I mean, they do serve a little bit of their purpose on screen, like finding the kids and all that, and they still have their personalities intact that make me really love them. But there are characters that I don't really seem to care for, like this news reporter guy whose last name is Pester, and I actually found the news reporter guy like very, very annoying, and he just seemed like a total jerk. And I felt like they could have just cut him away from the film because he felt like a very useless character, other than to just make himself look big and just to, pretty much act like a huge jerk, especially to the parents who've lost their kids. The Rangers are pretty much meh as characters. I mean, they are just a couple of people who just like to talk about nature until they find out that, oh, there are babies that are being lost, and the female ranger manages to help out only a teensy weensy bit. So overall, the characters were kind of hit and miss at best, with the best ones being the main characters and the worst ones being the ones like that news reporter guy whose last name is Pester, and, well, and to some extent the Rangers. But despite that, the voice acting is very much top notch. You basically have E.G. Daily, Christine Cavanaugh, Kath Soucie, Cheryl Chase, Joe Alasky, Jack Riley, Melanie Chardoff, and even Tim Curry, who voiced the news reporter guy, give off really fine performances and really work to the best of their abilities when it comes to the script that they got. So overall, it didn't really hold up that much for me, but that doesn't mean it's a bad movie. It's just that I'm kind of in the middle of it. There were elements that kind of worked, but there were elements of it that didn't work for me at all as I grew up. So I'd have to give this film, well, a 3 out of 5. It's an okay film. You can enjoy it from time to time. It's not the best thing ever. It's one of those films you can watch if you feel bored, if you feel like there's nothing else to do, or if you just want to have like sort of a rollicking good time. But don't expect it to be any much deeper. Don't expect it to be any more thought-provoking. Just make sure that you just have fun with this film and nothing more. Well, that's all for now. Be sure to tune in later where I review Rugrats in Paris. So until then, see you later, everybody.